Hello friends, ArtsyMommas here, and today we're going to go over some needle felting basics. We won't be making anything in this tutorial today, but we will go over how to handle the needle for felting, and we'll look at the materials and the tools that you need to get you started. So I'll show you some of the tools that I use and some tips I've learned over the years. I've been needle felting for about 10 years now, and I do a lot of different things, but one of the things I do on my Etsy shop is I offer custom-made figures. So these are just a few examples of some things I've made for clients over the years. And sometimes they're famous figures or cartoon characters or wedding cake toppers, different things, even sometimes animals that I've made. So that just gives you an idea of what I do. And we will now talk about the tools to get you started. The first thing you'll need is a pad. So this is a needle felting pad that I use. This is my favorite type of pad. It's very dense and thick. And this is one I've purchased on Etsy that I like to use. There are lots of different types of pads you can use. You can even get upholstery foam like this from a craft store, and you can cut this down with a butter knife, or a electric knife works really great. So you can make your own pad. You would want it to be, this one's 2 inches thick, at least 2 inches thick. It could be thicker. Some people even use a burlap bag with rice in it. You can make that yourself. That's a great way to do your own. But this is the pad I use. Like I said, it's a bit denser. I prefer this one, and this is the one I use. So pad being the first thing you'll need. The second are felting needles. And these are specific to felting. They're not like a sewing needle. So you will need to find these. You can get them at different places. You can get them on Etsy. You can get them at craft stores. You can even get them, I found these at Daiso. So there's a lot of places to get them. I've gotten some on Etsy. As I said, this is a shop I like, and these are nice because you can get them color-coded. And I'll talk a little bit about the different sizes, gauges that they come in. So this is our felting needle. And if you can see, or if you have your own at home, take a look at the very tip. So the only work that's being done in felting is with the very tip of this needle. And how felting works is that you are taking this needle that has tiny little barbs on it. And wool, the fibers of wool actually have barbs on them. So you're tangling those fibers as you stab the wool. So that's all that's happening, is a tangling of wool. And the more you tangle it, the tighter it gets. So we use felting needles that come in different gauges. And that's, like I said, how kind of thick this end piece is. They range in the 30s to the 40s. And the smaller the number, so the 30s would be a thicker gauge. And the higher the number, the 40s would be a thinner gauge. So the thinner would be for more detail. And the coarser would be for quicker felting for, say, like rougher projects. I recommend starting with something in the 30s, a bigger, sturdier gauge of needle, because they do break. And this is a good starting one because it's less likely to break since it's a little stronger. The ones that I'll show you that I use, I like to use these needles with the silicone on the top for grip. It just makes it a lot easier to hold on to. And then you can even get ones that have 2 needles kind of mounted together. Like I said, there are these finer gauges. This is probably, I think, a 40 or 42 gauge. So it's a lot finer than the 30 gauge. And needles come all different types of models. This is like a multi-felting tool. This is a multi-felting tool. I personally don't like to use these a lot, but some people do. I prefer just a really fine gauge because of the level of detail that I use. But I recommend to you getting some sturdier needles in the 30 gauge area to start with. Okay, next we'll talk about the actual wool that you're going to use. So as we said, needle felting is just stabbing wool with these special needles and you're tangling up the fibers. These needles are very sharp, so you do want to be careful. We'll talk about that with our tips later, but they are sharp. So you want to keep those, away from children or anyone that's not aware. So be careful with those. They are sharp. The wool we use in needle felting is called batting. This is batting. You can see that it sort of looks like a blanket almost. It's kind of rough, but it definitely has this direction. So it's wool that's been processed, some, but not as much as, say, roving. This is called roving. And if you can see, it looks a little bit more like a rope. So this is the wool being even combed more so that it's kind of smooth and has this more shiny rope-like texture. So this oftentimes people that make yarn would turn this into yarn. So you can use roving for needle felting, but I prefer batting. It felts a lot easier and because basically it's already kind of tangled. So we don't want to untangle it and brush it out into the roving just to felt it back together into the coarse texture that we want to make the shapes. So batting is best, in my opinion. And this is an undyed batting. And you can get this in pretty big quantities for pretty inexpensive on Etsy or in other places to get wool. So that's what undyed batting looks like. And if you're getting colors, this is a brand I like to get, a shop on Etsy. And you can see this is usually how the batting comes, kind of rolled up. It's quite a bit that you get in this serving size here. You can see. So when you unroll that, and that's the really great thing about wool too, that, it could cost anywhere from $3 to $10 for a bundle, depending on the type of wool you get like this. But it's quite a bit of wool, and this would make a lot of projects. So that lets you see the wool. So we talked about pad, needles, and wool. We talked about how that actually works. And the last thing I would say is just to get a really nice, some kind of box to keep everything in. A box that is portable, because you can take needle felting with you anywhere. That's what I love about it. That closes securely, because you'll have those needles in there and you don't want those to, children or anyone to get a hold of those. And also the wool, pets do like wool, so they might want to chew on it. So you want to have your wool, I put it in Ziplocs a lot of times and then put it inside my portable box. So just have a box to put all that in to keep it out of the way. All right, we are going to go through our basic tutorial of just how needle felting works. We're not going to make anything. I just want to show you how you handle the needle. So I have some needle handling tips that I like to send out with my kids. The first one is just be careful. As I said, they are sharp. You probably will stab yourself at some point and it probably will bleed. So just expect that to happen, but be careful. Keep those needles, keep an eye on what you're doing. So when we felt, we have our wool, we lay it on our pad, and say I was going to start to just make a cylinder. So I roll that up, I take my needle, and the motion that we're doing is just a straight up and down motion. So we are just stabbing the wool to tangle those fibers. And if you remember, only this end has the barbs. So only this very end is doing the work. So you don't need to drive the needle down into the pad. You do not want to do that, because if it hits the surface underneath, it's going to break your needle. So you only need to get it down so that you can hear it entering just the top of the wool or the pad surface there. So that action is what is actually felting your wool, tangling those fibers. And that's it. It's really that simple. Okay, so that's the first step, straight up and down. You don't want to go sideways because it's really easy to sort of wrench your needle and the tip can break very easily. So just really work on the straight up and down movement. Later on, as you get more advanced, there'll be some angling, but for right now, straight up and down. The second thing is you don't have to go really fast or really hard. Some people do enjoy a little more vigorous felting, can, be rewarding to stab like that. But generally, I would just say slow and steady is all you need to do. Straight up and down, not hard, and not really, really fast. That's when you'll hurt yourself. And you'll notice too, I kind of keep my fingers bent so that I don't stab them. Okay? So straight up and down. Don't need to go too fast. And my felting etiquette I like to show is leaving your needle right here anytime you just want to take a break, you want to step away. Do not just sit it down next to you. You'll lose the needle. Someone will get hurt. Just practice doing that. Whenever you take a break, poke your needle right in your pad. And when you're done for the day, what I like to do is tuck it into the top of my pad to store it. But just be careful because you're felting into this. You want to keep them over to the sides because if you stab your needle into your pad, into that other needle, it could break your needle. So just be sure those are on the side. This is the way I like to store my needles when I'm not working on my felting. Okay, so the other question people often have when they're felting is, when is it done? And the easy answer is whenever you decide it's done. So felting, as we discussed, the more you poke it, it's just tangling it. So the more you poke, the tighter it will get, the denser your project will get. So you're done when you think it's done. There really is, it's just a preference. Some people like to felt more, leave it more fluffy. Some people like to felt towards a lot more dense. I personally felt to a denser, probably texture because it's easier to do some of those details, like when I'm doing facial features and such. But it's really up to you. You can take a look on Google and find some different felting projects, and you'll see some look really wispy and flowy. Some look very dense. And so that is just a personal preference. Whenever you feel it's done, it's done. And you'll see in later tutorials when we're doing different projects, we'll felt them different amounts of time, depending on what we're doing, to get that either denser look or really more fluffy work. And some things like hair, obviously, is going to be felted a little less, so it looks more flowy. Things like, a foot or a hand would be felted a little more to get a little more dense and a little more detail. So that's going to wrap up our basic felting tips and materials. I would suggest next to check out my tutorial on doing a needle felted flat shape using a cookie cutter. That is a good project for beginners to start on. And I will see you all next time. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and check out my Etsy page and have fun.